Thank you. Hi, good morning, and good morning, all. It is truly my honor and privilege to be here at the Share Conference, and it is so wonderful to interact with people from the museum sector. And living in Lincolnshire, I can only know how important that is to the economy, to well-being, and to everybody's existence, especially in these challenging times. So, thank you so much for having me here. And we've got a lot of speakers today. I'm hoping I can do my bit to really share from my perspective the experience from a business point of view. Now, in essence, my background, although I'm at the university right now, is business, and I'll share that in a bit. And I'm hoping that as I bring my experience to life, I can touch upon one of the things that really cements well with your theme for today, which was regroup, rethink, and reset, which is the growth mindset. And the mindset word in itself has set in it, which means it's at a point of time. So I'd actually like to extend the argument to say mind flow, which Jenny actually brings me to the point of the flexibility that you spoke about, of flowing with it. How do you go and flow with the changes that come your way and really embrace them and make a difference so that you're ahead of time rather than letting time get ahead of you, just borrowing from what you said. So I'm hoping we're very well aligned here. So I have about 20 minutes. There is a lot to bring in because there's so much I want to share. So I'm going to go through a few slides, but all of them are thoughts and experiences that I'm bringing from my 24 years now in corporate world before I came here. And I'm hoping you can pick some things from it to apply into the business that you are. Now, as I speak and I take you through the concepts, and I promise you they're very practical, there's nothing academic in what I'm going to bring. In your minds, I want you to play your own business, your own scenario, and your own situation of what you're doing so that you can apply it directly as we speak. So I'm hoping that's all right. I'll share my screen so that I can share some of the slides that I have here ready for you today. Okay, so as I said that I've titled this Off the Sticky Floor, and I shall introduce this concept in a quick bit, leading with a mind flow in your mind, which is how can you allow this time to flow and you flow with it, but ahead of it. And what does it take practically to be able to do that is what I'm going to try and share. It obviously sits beautifully with regrouping. And to my mind, regrouping is getting the people who you need to work alongside, to group together, to be sharing the empathy of the time that we are in together, and to really leverage the best of what everyone has to group and move forward. Rethinking is about reimagining. How do we reimagine this scenario and time that we are in to look into the future and make a success of what we have? And resetting is really about stopping at this point of time and looking at the wider imperatives of what you need to do what you're doing best. So let's keep this theme, and I'm going to keep coming back to this through the next 20 minutes and seeing where we are. I think first and foremost is, I'm not from the museum sector, so I'm hoping some of my experience will allow you to know where I'm coming from and where to extract things from. So I'm really a business and marketing professional. I've worked across Microsoft, which was my stint before the University of Lincoln. I was director of marketing for Microsoft India. So a long way off, but it's related to business at a wonderful level. It was really an enriching experience. But before that, I was in Scotland at Scottish Rugby. I know it's very, very different. It was the helm of that brand and Vodafone and things. But on the side, it's my interest and passion to share my experiences as a person in business, but also as a woman in business. And I see a lot of women here in the audience. So this talk is not focused on women in leadership, but there are many strands that you can perhaps pick up for yourselves, and maybe one for another day that we'll take up women and leadership as well. But just bear that in mind as well as I go through my slides today. So I'm going to kickstart with a very, acronym that I have spoken about many times called VUCA. Now, if you've heard about VUCA or known about VUCA, you will know that there was never a better or bigger VUCA moment than what we've seen in the last 18 months. I used to speak about it. I have a lot more respect for it now, having lived through this kind of VUCA for so many months now. And VUCA, for those of you who may not be too familiar with this, is the volatility, the uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And what better four words can describe what we all have been through in our business, in our lives? And as I always maintain, profession and personal go together because we bring our best to work every day, and you cannot separate the two. So many things define this. What has happened, more and more the need of technology, as we're seeing here as well, the social media conversations that have kept us afloat, the support we've given each other, but newer consumers in your context. What do they look like? What do they want? How do they treat things that come their way? It's very important to look at, this whole thing. So more so in the context, regroup, rethink, reset, because we are in the most VUCA of the worlds that we have probably seen in our lifetimes at this point of time. So important to do that. So I'm going to take only this one academic slide and no more of that, which is the classic law of economics, because it affects all of us in our lives, which is there will always be limited resources being chased by unlimited uses. That is the classic law of economics. You would associate with it, I associate with it, whether it's personal life or professional life, there is always that problem. So it's never an excuse of there are too many choices, I don't have this. The question is, how do you utilize and leverage what you have to the best of the situation? Again, creating that same juxtaposition between rethinking it and being flexible about how you can make that an opportunity and not a barrier. So I'm going to share a very simple diagram here, which is that we have a choice. We have a choice of adopting a fixed mindset, which is limiting, or a growth mindset, which allows freedom, fluidity, and motion. And it's very, very easy to identify fixed mindsets. You'll identify it at work. You'll identify it in the ecosystem that you work in. They avoid challenges. They don't really want to progress. And there are barriers that seem bigger than they are. But a growth mindset is willing to find inspiration, is willing to absorb what it takes, accepts criticism, but thinks big. But let me tell you, with thinking big, there are risks. Of course there are. You can never do something new and something different if you don't take risks. But naturally, the intelligent mind takes calculated risks and collaborative risks. So you have a group of people that you work with, and the growth mindset is where I'm going to focus this discussion on today, because we're talking about regrouping, rethinking, and resetting it. So I'm going to show you this very simple slide. And I know we don't have the time flexibility to run too many conversations between us right now, but in your mind, if you can look at the slide and think of what you see on the slide, just what you see on it. If you want to drop into the comments, more than welcome. If you want to just think about it, that's perfectly fine. So what do you see on this slide? So very often when I play this at workshops and in classrooms and at conferences, okay, let me see what's coming through there on the chat. Yes, absolutely. Oh, okay, fabulous. Yes. So we've got a variety of things coming in. A black hole, a black dot, the white space. 80% of the people who I work with and interact with absolutely rightly see the black dot. There is a black dot on this white slide. But I want to bring to focus the fact that that black dot space is already taken. That space is gone. What exists, however, is the huge white space around that black dot, on which we can draw our own picture, on which we can paint our own canvas. So the important part for us is to look at the white space that's available to us in this challenging situation that we have, and really figure out what are we going to do with it in this time of the pandemic, because we are going to regroup, rethink, and reset. Okay, so I'll introduce a small concept here, a very interesting one that I actually came across at Microsoft. So I must give credit to Microsoft for teaching us this. It's called the 3 confidences, and it will relate to each of us individually. So while I'm playing this out to you, if you can put yourself in the scenario of the 3 confidences. So they say there are 3 and only 3 types of things that make a professional truly a leader. One is technical competence, which is you are a museum's, a leader or a representative or a volunteer. You are really good at what you do. I'm a finance professional. I'm a really good finance professional. Yeah, I'm a data scientist and I know my stuff, the back of my hand. The other one is relational, my sense of self-worth. How do I think of myself in relation to others? And the third is influential, which is slightly different, which is my power to take people along. How do I take people along with me when I have something to contribute? Now, the relational influential are a little bit different. One is about self-worth, one is about influence of people. And it is when these 3 come together that you truly create a powerful being, a powerful person at work, contributing to what you're doing best. So there was a big survey run on saying which one is the most important out of all 3. Of course, all 3 are important, but which one really leads the pack in being successful in times of resilience, in times of crises, and even in normal business times? And that was a very interesting survey that was done here. So without having the time to take your guesses on it or your inputs on it, I will expose this to you that influential skills came out to be at the top of the pack because technical is assumed to be hygiene, something that you know you will do and you expect it to do. It is so important, and I cannot stress the fact more so in the times that we live in when we are regrouping, to take people collaboratively along with you and create spheres of influence that can make that difference, that can reimagine your business, that can allow you to be flexible. I thought this was really wonderful because as you gain more work experience and as you gain more and more traditional leadership skills, the ability to do your job well technically goes down and the dial of being able to influence people goes up. And I have seen that in practice in my many years of working. So it is so important to be able to create that. So if we just keep this basket of three things in mind and look at ourselves of where we truly pull the levers, it would be very key to be able to tide over this time. This is a very small tip, that I learned again in my days at Microsoft, because these people, it's amazing that these companies are not who they are for no reason. They teach you the best practices, and it's my privilege to be able to share why those companies are where they are with practices like this. So this was a beautiful one in the times pre-pandemic, which is, take a period of time, let's say, 6 months, and find 10 people at the workplace, or if your organization is smaller, find 2 who you haven't worked with or don't deal with on a day-to-day basis, and just set up a coffee with them. People you don't cross paths with usually, and it will surprise you how much you learn from each other without having a direct link at work. Now, this is more true in larger organizations, I must say, because small organizations, you're already multitasking and you're tightly fit together, which is great. But in larger organizations, we were forced to do this. And I must tell you that I totally enjoyed this, and I was amazed at how much I got out of a simple exercise of fixing 10 cups of coffee with 10 people who I wouldn't usually work with. So that person in the legal team who I wouldn't usually go to unless I have had a problem with my marketing campaign, I fixed up a time with them and learned so much. So learning, being permeable to the opportunities that others can offer becomes a really important trait. So networks create a huge positive value at this time because we are all regrouping, rethinking, and resetting. So I'm going to introduce a wonderful recommendation of a book here, actually, for you, which is, by Professor Vijay. He's, a distinguished professor in the US, and he's come up with a very simple concept called the 3-box solution. And the next few minutes, I'm going to take you through this 3-box solution because I thought it resonated with me so well about the mind flow concept that we are talking about. So if you just stay with me on this for a few minutes, I'll take you through this. So this says that there is box 1, if you look at the bottom box there, which is about the present. It is where you are, the situation you're in, and how you manage and optimize the business in that situation. And that is the present that you're dealing with. You can wish to stay where you are. You can wish to go with the flow. That is the box you're sitting in. The box 3 is what I'm going to jump to, which is on top, which is about creating a new future that you can dream of, that you're resetting to. Now, when you create a new future and you want to move from box 1 to box 3, inherently there will be big leaps, there will be big dreams, there'll be big visions, and there will be big risks. So not all organizations or people or museums, I'll come to the industry you're in, will want to take that leap. However, the times we work in, the changes we've seen, and we saw some conversation just before my session, which talked about your newer audiences, how to cater to this change in the flexibility, necessitate us perhaps to think about this model in our context. But how do you do that? Well, you do that via going to box 2. Now, box 2 is about shedding parts of your present that cannot travel with you towards the box 3 future that you have dreamed of. Now, there are changes to maybe audiences, culture, content, communication, technology that take you to box 3, which means you need to take out elements of box 1 to be able to get into box 2 and then move to box 3. Now, this was such a beautiful and simple way. We do it all the time. It's just that we don't realize that we're doing this, which I thought Prof put beautifully. And in fact, I spoke to Prof before, my talks that I've been giving on this model, taking his permission and telling him how wonderfully applicable it is across all sectors. And I'm going to play back to him, the fact that it also applies to museums, I guess, equally well, which is the 3 ways of looking at it. Just as an example, Apple, famously known for, telling the customer what they want before you know what you want. So before you know it, the version of Apple phones that you have are out and the new ones are in. So they don't follow box one, they're constantly living in box three. I'll give you another example of Microsoft because I lived it. Microsoft always wanted to put a desktop on every desk. It soon realized, before it realized, that the world had moved to the cloud. They were sitting in box one. The world moved from box two and went to three, and they were left behind. Now, this is the catch-up act that was done in the early 2000s, where the world moved to cloud, and they had to shed parts of the present to move into the cloud future. So two very stark examples there of how you can leverage box one, box shed two, and then move to a three. Now, these are examples I'm hoping in your mind, you're playing your own scenarios using a model like this, because we need to today think about regrouping, rethinking, and resetting. So the simple model, I'm hope, does what it takes and what we need to do going into the future. So the question arises that what can we do, as leaders? What do we do? How do we imagine ourselves to make some, have some thoughts or make some changes or make some delta to be able to strive for a box three future where we are reimagining the way we're going to succeed in this future, not because it's full of challenges, because it's full of opportunity. How do we view that opportunity? So one of the things that I'm going to say is that we're the storyteller of our own lives, and it's in our hands to create our own legend or not. This is our moment. This is our time. This is a big opportunity that doesn't come very often in a lifetime of work. And I think it's in our hands to grab it and say, what can we do? Because at the end of the day, it's our personal brand that's going to drive the brand we work for. And I say this right from my students to CEOs that I speak to, which is at the end of the day, we don't work for a brand always. We work for ourselves, making ourselves the best, because that contributes to the brand that we work for. So it's so intrinsically linked that it becomes very, very key. Now, very often I hear, and this is well published, especially in the context of women and leadership. I'm going to borrow a little bit from there here, that there are things stopping us. The pandemic stops us. The ecosystem and environment stops us. The processes stop us. How do we view the glass ceiling, or how do we blame it on the system to say, I cannot because? There is an alternate view that I'm going to pose here, which I have been researching for a while. In fact, I'm hoping to publish very soon on this as well, which is instead of looking at the ceiling, we look at the sticky floor that we are perhaps standing on. Maybe it's us who's not willing to lift ourselves off that sticky floor, to take that foot off and say, what is it that I can do today to make that progress, rather than look at the far environment and say, that's not helping me, that's not allowing me to do it. Because there are some self-limiting barriers that stop us from taking action. So the movement from external to internal concepts, and instead of blaming others, to take that ownership on ourselves, becomes such a powerful narrative that we stop and say, what is it that I can do to get off my sticky floor? And it is amazing, but we all stand on our sticky floors at some point of time or the other, personal lives or professional life. We can do it, but we just don't. Something stops us. The power, the fear of failure, or cultural barriers, or I've even had people who are assuming what other people think, and hence, stay on the sticky floor. And it's very interesting to note how, if we view it this way, there probably are things that we can do ourselves. Because Dr. Seuss's famous quote says that today you are you, that's truer than true, and there's no one alive who's youer than you, which is your own self and your own actions can propel you to go into the future better than waiting for someone to carve a way for you and carve a path out for you. But what kind of leaders will really succeed for regrouping, rethinking, and resetting? And one of the fundamental traits that are becoming very, very important, it's not about equality, but can we think about equity? How do we create an equitable environment to be able to propel us as leaders with the right traits? Because diversity and inclusiveness and sensitized leaders towards D&I becomes a very important trait. Because at the end of the day, it's a very interesting picture, this one. I look at it in a marvel each time, saying it's the same object throwing two different types of shadows. Because it's about perspectives of how people see things. And how do we as leaders pick up those perspectives, see it the way people see it, and then regroup? And I'm playing straight into your theme here of regrouping, empathizing with the way people see it and embracing the way they see it, because that becomes so, so key. This is a very interesting one. And pardon me if you've seen it before, but what do you see on the picture here? If you just think about it for a minute, what do you see? We probably see a load of sheep, and they're all filing in through a gate, perhaps. But if you look closely, there is no fence around that gate. There is no barrier to say the sheep can't go through the sides, but they still line up to go through that narrow opening of the gate. So this is called the trap of thinking. We think there's a barrier. We think there's a glass ceiling. We think the pandemic is stopping us, but the mind flow, or the ability to get ahead of this barrier, transcend it, think different, regroup, rethink, and reset, and really share that vision with each other, is what is perhaps going to get us out of this. Because if we get out of the trap of thinking, there is a way to get off the sticky floor, make it happen, take that first step, and take out the self-limiting barriers. Because a ship is very safe in the harbor, but it was not built to be in the harbor. It was built to rough the seas. It was built to sail. And it would be so interesting to take the journey. You get the tools with yourself for what it needs to sail and get through those rough seas, because in a rough sea, we possibly are. And some of us are definitely more affected than the others. It's a fact of what we're living through. But how can we think of it as an ability that lies in our hands and not necessarily in someone else's hands? Because today we're going to focus the rest of the day. This is just the first shared talk. You've got plenty of content in the day, but how do we reflect and look upon regrouping, rethinking, and resetting? Because as a leader, you need 3 bones, and I just love this. You need a wishbone, a backbone, and believe you me, a funny bone. However tough this is, there is a wish and an aspiration to move forward, a backbone of staying resilient and strong in times like this, but at the same time, carrying your teams with you, carrying yourself, and maintaining your sense of humor and your positive attitude and your mental wellness to be going forward, because that is what will create the impact that you want to take along with you. Because as they say, and very famously, it says you can't go back and change the beginning. What you can do, start right here and script your end. So that's in our hands. Stay ahead of the curve, stay flexible, and regroup, rethink, and reimagine. So thank you so much. And hopefully, I've shared a bit of my experience here of what really intrigues me, what really gets businesses going, and what takeaways we can take to implement back within our business. I'm hoping that has helped kickstart the day for you here today.